Love triangles are not exactly uncommon in the wrestling business. With conventionally attractive people working in such close quarters and traveling together so often, strong bonds naturally form, and there have been numerous notable cases of wrestlers who have strayed and started relationships with their colleagues, maybe even despite already being attached to someone else in the business, if not the exact same promotion. A delicate situation at the best of times, but what happens when one of the parties involved is one of the most powerful people in the industry? In the summer of 2001, it became public knowledge that multi-time WWE Champion Triple H, then Women's Champion Chyna, and Stephanie McMahon, the heir apparent to the WWE Empire, were embroiled in a love triangle that would ultimately change the course of sports entertainment forever. Just how things got to that point and what happened afterwards is at times scandalous, fascinating, and tragic. A pro wrestling storyline, but played out in real life. I'm Jack from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is the true story of the Triple H, Chyna, and Stephanie McMahon WWE love triangle. Paul Levesque, Joanie Laurer, and Stephanie McMahon all took very different paths to get to WWE. Stephanie's was, obviously, the shortest one since her parents, Vince and Linda McMahon, owned and ran the promotion. Steph's work for the family business started early, modeling for WWE's merchandise catalogs at just the tender age of 13. After graduating from Boston University with a degree in communications in 1998, Stephanie took a full-time job as an account executive at WWE's New York offices. In early 1999, she was thrust into the spotlight after being written into a storyline involving her father and The Undertaker. It was the beginning of an on-screen role that would continue on and off for the next 2 decades. Paul Levesque was a childhood wrestling fan who, in his early teens, began bodybuilding in preparation for chasing his dream. The winner of the 1988 Mr. Teenage New Hampshire started training with the legendary Walter Killer Kowalski and made his in-ring debut on March 24, 1992. After working on the Northeast Indie circuit for a couple of years, Levesque got a job with WCW, where he wrestled for a year as Terror Rising and as John Paul Levesque. Instead of signing a new contract with Eric Bischoff's organization, Levesque opted to try his chances with WWE and debuted for the promotion in April of '95 as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Joanie Laurer had a turbulent upbringing and began building up her already large frame by lifting weights when she turned 16. After traveling the world for both her higher education and as a member of the Peace Corps, then working various jobs in the United States, Joanie began entering fitness competitions, and in '95, she enrolled in Killer Kowalski's training school. Despite only being a rookie at the time, Laurer had set her desires on the big time and met Hunter and his fellow Click running buddy Shawn Michaels after a show at some point in '96. The Heartbreak Kid and Triple H were both impressed by Laurer, who wrestled under the name Joanie Lee, and pitched bringing her in as Helmsley's bodyguard to Vince McMahon, who was initially against the idea because he believed audiences wouldn't buy a woman beating up the men. After Kowalski informed Shane McMahon of WCW's burgeoning interest in his trainee, however, WWE snapped her up to a deal. Laurer claims that Michaels had threatened that he wouldn't drop the WWE title unless they gave her a contract. Joanie, soon to be identified as Chyna, made her WWE debut at the In Your House Final 4 pay-per-view, attacking Goldust's manager Marlena after the Bizarre One played a part in Helmsley falling to Intercontinental Champion Rocky Maivia. They may have had a bodyguard-client relationship on-screen, but off-screen, Levesque and Laurer were in the midst of a blossoming romance, having bonded over their shared training background and their love of pumping iron. Not that fans, or most of the wrestlers for that matter, will have known about it, since Levesque endeavored to keep it a secret. But why? Well, according to Joanie's account, Triple H was cognizant of shielding her from accusations of, quote, sleeping her way to the top, or at least to a prominent position within the company. But Joanie was not entirely thrilled with the secretive nature of their relationship. She noted in her 2001 autobiography, If They Only Knew, that her boyfriend would still be getting approached in public by people he had enjoyed previous dalliances with, and she just had to sit there and play dumb as he made some excuse as to why he couldn't enjoy a further dalliance at this time. Those who knew Levesque best were very surprised when they found out about his relationship, as during a short stint in WCW, he had developed a bit of a reputation as something of a ladies' man. The couple may have been playing coy backstage, but in front of the camera, they went from strength to strength as an act, especially when partnered up with Shawn Michaels and Rick Rude to form the original incarnation of D-Generation X. Despite having only been in the business really for a couple of years, Joanie Laurer was part of one of the hottest acts in wrestling right as WWE's business was about to pick up. Levesque, meanwhile, finally looked like delivering on his potential after a series of gimmicks and pushes had failed to get him over to a significant degree, but DX changed all that. And the pair's stock only continued to climb when Michaels left WWE following WrestleMania 14 and Triple H became the new leader of the revamped DX. In this new version of the stable, Chyna's role increased and she was no longer just the silent, stoic muscle standing behind the frat boys. She now spoke, she got more involved in angles, and she actually participated in matches. 1999 was a banner year for the ninth wonder of the world, who made history several times. She became the first woman to compete in a Royal Rumble, the first woman to enter the King of the Ring tournament, and the first woman to win a men's title when she beat Jeff Jarrett to bag the IC Championship. During '99, it was also common knowledge that Chyna and Triple H were an item, with WWE even promoting the fact by releasing a VHS profile of the pair which showed them discussing their relationship. They were also featured prominently on an episode of MTV's True Life, which showed them traveling together on the road. But if the year was a banner one for Joanie, it was also the year that Paul Levesque reached the pinnacle of the business, becoming WWE Champion for the first time on the Raw the night after SummerSlam. Now an established member of the Main Eventers Club, Triple H started developing a closer relationship with Vince McMahon, who would discuss creative and business matters with the game around this time. In storyline, Helmsley was at war with McMahon, but little did anybody know, fantasy and reality were about to mix in unexpected ways. After getting over her disturbing ordeal with The Undertaker, the bright-eyed and innocent Stephanie McMahon began a kayfabe romance with Test. The hulking Canadian had fought for her honor, defeating Steph's brother Shane in a love her or leave her street fight at SummerSlam. Having, beaten the blessing out of Shane, Test proposed to Stephanie and their wedding was set, or I guess booked because it's a storyline, for the November 29th, 1999 edition of Raw. But of course, the couple's day was ruined by that pesky degenerate Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who hijacked the ceremony and played a video of him marrying a passed-out Stephanie at a Las Vegas drive-thru chapel. Nothing at all creepy about that, or about Triple H bragging that he was consummating their marriage. No, nothing weird about, nothing straight. Let's just move on. It turned out Triple H and Stephanie were in cahoots all along, and the billion-dollar princess turned heel, betraying her dad at the end of his street fight with her new husband at Armageddon. The McMahon-Helmsley faction, as they were called, was suddenly the force to be reckoned with on WWE television, and both performers grew immensely as characters during that time. But if the rumor and innuendo is to be believed, they also grew a lot closer together in real life. Linda McMahon was, apparently, the first to realize that real sparks were flying between Triple H and Stephanie when she saw them interacting at a TV taping. Both Stephanie and Triple H have both in the years stated that they believe Vince put them together on television as a way to bring them closer behind the scenes. And Stephanie noted many times that her father, who pretty much forbid her from dating any members of his roster, often told her that she needed to find a man, quote, just like Triple H. But not actually Triple H, right? For what it's worth, the big wedding swerve was actually pitched by former WWE announcer Kevin Kelly after he and his wife, both ardent soap opera fans, talked about how nobody would see this twist coming. Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara, the masterminds behind the Stephanie Test romance, had planned for Test to eventually turn heel and dump Stephanie, solidifying him as a top heel in the process. Now, clearing up rumors about her romantic life, Chyna did note in an interview with a Dallas-based newspaper in April of 2000 that she and Helmsley had in fact broken up. It was speculated at the time that part of the reason may have been her desire to live in California in order to pursue acting roles. And she had indeed received attention from Hollywood and landed guest starring parts in TV shows like Pacific Blue and Third Rock from the Sun. But Triple H, on the other hand, had just bought a big new house in his native New Hampshire and planned on putting down roots. In a June-July profile in Talk magazine, Laura noted that she would like to marry Levesque but didn't think the feeling was mutual, and also admitted that she felt guilty about dumping her then-boyfriend back when she got a job with WWE in early '97. During a media blitz to promote her upcoming Playboy cover issue, Chyna appeared on The Howard Stern Show on September 29, 2000. In amongst Howard Stern's apparently requisite comments about her, quote, mannish appearance and prying questions about her romantic life, Chyna confirmed that she and Triple H were living together and referred to him as her boyfriend, seemingly confirming that they were indeed back together. As far as Stephanie was concerned, Chyna didn't appear too worried. Outwardly, at least, she was very complimentary of the boss's daughter who was playing her boyfriend's on-screen partner. During an appearance on TSN's Off the Record, for example, she praised Stephanie for paying her dues in a different way, conceding that McMahon knew far more about the business than she did. The release of Chyna's book in early 2001 gave very few clues about her relationship with Helmsley, besides noting that he didn't want the relationship known to the wrestlers early on, as he felt it would hurt his reputation amongst the boys. Laura also wrote about how professional wrestling would always be his real wife, while all she could hope for was to be at best his mistress. She pretty much covered their breakup in early 2000 with just the one-sentence statement, "I broke up with Hunter." Chyna's book, as one of WWE's first autobiography releases, did extraordinarily well, by the way, peaking at number 2 on the bestsellers list. It seemed from the outside looking in that Chyna was a major star and a huge asset to the company, between the mainstream press, the amazing book sales, and her record-setting Playboy cover issue. But there were problems behind the scenes, not least of which was the company and the star being at creative loggerheads. Chyna was used to wrestling with, and often beating, men, and felt that her popularity entitled her to mix it up with the Rocks and the Steve Austins of the world in big main events. But the writing team had a very different view of things and wanted her to wrestle just with the women. Chyna, though, felt that doing so was beneath her, and her attitude was evident during squash match victories over Ivory, Molly Holly, Trish Stratus, and Lita. She confessed as much during an interview in June 2001, saying the following: "I don't mean this in a bad way, but so many women are not in the same league as me. I've been training and wrestling men for 5 years. Now it is very difficult. I can't go through the top guys. Rocky would never let me beat him. It's very difficult for me to develop a program with the women right now, so the best part about the Chyna character is she is more of an attraction than anything." Clearly, Joanie Laurer felt that her WWE career was at a crossroads. But little did she know, she'd already wrestled her last WWE match. After defending the women's title against Lita at Judgment Day on May 20th, Chyna took some time off to have a cyst surgically removed from her reproductive tract. On June 21st, WWE sent her a fax informing her that the company was ceasing all further contract negotiations with her. She would remain under contract to WWE through to the expiration of her deal on November 30th. Now, there were several factors and at least one backstage incident that led WWE to make the decision to wash their hands of Chyna. As already mentioned, creative was an issue, specifically Chyna's desire to be a top star in the men's division, something WWE didn't want to promote, coupled with her obvious contempt at being programmed against other women. Chyna's belief that she was one of WWE's biggest stars also had played into her negotiations over a new contract. Jim Ross, then head of WWE's talent relations department, would later recall that Laura and her agent had demanded a downside guarantee of $1 million, something only those at the level of The Rock, Steve Austin, The Undertaker, and yes, Triple H had been granted in the recent past. Laura had done very well for herself in WWE, thanks in the main to the sales of her Playboy issue, which was one of the biggest selling copies of the magazine in decades. She may have in fact made over $1 million in 2000, but the most that Vince McMahon and Jim Ross were willing to offer her was a $400,000 per year downside, which evidently wasn't good enough for the ninth wonder of the world. And there's valid points on both sides, I suppose, but there had also been resentment towards her brewing backstage for a while, with some members of the locker room believing that Chyna's ego had inflated due to her star status and all the attention from Tinseltown. They also resented that her push had been due primarily to her unique look, as her actual in-ring ability was really not quite up to the standard expected from an average male star in the WWE, and her matches were usually mapped out very carefully in advance. And this locker room, full of men, many of them respected veterans who'd put her over on television and then worked the house shows that she didn't work, well, they weren't exactly sorry to see her go. As for the women, they saw it as an opportunity to progress up the card themselves and possibly take her spot. Another issue, and this is a big one, was that Laura discovered the long-term affair between Levesque and Stephanie McMahon shortly before receiving her marching orders. Chyna had been suspicious that something was up for a while, despite Helmsley's denials. And one day, she looked in the fortuitously unlocked Halliburton briefcase that Levesque would take on the road with him. In it, she discovered love letters that Stephanie had written to him, some of them dated over a year earlier. Laura was crushed, and after a stormy confrontation, she left the house the two lived in together, ending the relationship for good. Soon after, Laura called Vince McMahon to let him know that she knew about the affair and would talk to him about it at the next TV taping. But at the taping, Joanie and Stephanie got together in a room and had a heated confrontation about the situation. According to Laura, Stephanie was unrepentant and let her know that she loved Levesque. Laura responded by threatening to choke Stephanie out before Vince intervened and sent the former two-time Intercontinental Champion home. Everybody realized that Laura was heartbroken, and even if there was money to be made with her, it wasn't worth the high probability of a volatile workplace situation between herself, Stephanie, and Triple H. And let's not forget, as well as Stephanie being Vince's only daughter, she also held a prominent position on the writing team, while Triple H, although he was out injured after suffering a torn quad the night after Judgment Day, was still one of WWE's biggest stars. A couple of weeks after being told that WWE would not be renewing her contract, Laura gave an interview which aired on several UPN news stations after SmackDown. She brought up various things, wanting to wrestle men, not wanting to wrestle women, and agreed that there wasn't much more WWE could do with her character, while warning the wrestlers still there that with ECW and WCW now out of business, their options in the industry were very limited, and that was something that she herself was about to find out firsthand. In an interview with the Star tabloid a couple of weeks later, Laura opened up about discovering the affair, but she didn't directly blame it for her WWE exit. Her main reason seemed to be WWE not offering her the money she felt she was worth, which she blamed on the promotion's monopolization of the business. And from WWE's perspective, they didn't want to pay at least $1 million to someone who only wanted to work TV, not non-televised house shows, only wrestle the men, not the women, and then get to spend the rest of her week going to auditions in Los Angeles. Laura, whose publicist was clearly working overtime at this point, made an appearance on Larry King on August 29th. He brought up Triple H dumping her for Stephanie, which she said was true, but didn't blame her departure on that, even though she admitted to being hurt by the situation. She also said that she tried to keep it out of her contract negotiations, but it might have played a small part in WWE's decision not to renew her. During an appearance on Off the Record on November 8th, Laura placed most of the blame for the affair on Levesque, adding that Stephanie was immature for going along with it and that she would have handled things better had she not been cheated on with the boss's daughter. She said she was disappointed in how everything was handled, but did say that given Levesque's obsession with the wrestling business, Stephanie was probably the best person for him. In subsequent appearances on both The Howard Stern Show and Opie and Anthony, Laura continued to tear into Triple H, calling him a jerk, damaged goods, and a coward for not talking to her after their breakup, amongst other things using much stronger language than I can repeat here. Laura's belief was that she would be back in WWE at some point, even if only for a one-off deal like a WrestleMania match, but this seemed quite misguided, especially when Triple H, now back from injury, began to comment on their breakup publicly for the first time. On the same day that he returned to that thunderous Madison Square Garden reception, January 7, 2002, the cerebral assassin appeared on The Howard Stern Show, where he gave his side of the story. According to Triple H, who did say his ex was a good person and said that he had nothing bad to say about her, while Howard Stern and his crew made their typically unfunny jokes about Chyna's appearance, they were never engaged, as Laura had claimed. Triple H disagreed with that. Further to that point, Hunter also said there was a misconception about how things had ended, noting that they had been separated at one point and that he didn't consider what he did cheating. Well, that's all nice and vague, isn't it? Laura herself was plenty busy around this time, and that month scored another lucrative payday with her second Playboy cover, which was amongst the best-selling issues of all time. But as the months wore on, the offers began to dry up, and Laura found herself working for New Japan Pro Wrestling, being brought in by Antonio Inoki, who at the time, in a booking sense, was kind of losing his mind. During her tour with the promotion that fall, Laura used the pedigree to win matches, a nod to, or maybe a shot at, her former flame. Accompanying her on that tour was new boyfriend Sean Waltman, also known as X-Pac, who had been let go by WWE that August. While appearing on the Best Damn Sports Show period on November 14th, Laura announced that she and Waltman, who was still legally married at the time, had gotten engaged. The two had been friends for about 5 years, but the situation was maybe a little bit of a strange one, since Waltman was one of Paul Levesque's closest friends. Also in November, talent relations chief Jim Ross gave the old never say never line in regard to a Chyna WWE return, but admitted that it would be difficult considering Triple H and Stephanie's relationship. A relationship, by the way, that seemed to go from strength to strength. For all the talk that Levesque had gotten involved with McMahon as a means to strengthen his spot in the company, even his staunchest detractors would admit that he really did love her, and the news that he had proposed on Valentine's Day 2003 hardly came as a shock. Conversely, Laura's relationship with Waltman was tempestuous at best, marred by substance abuse issues and accusations of domestic violence leveled by both parties. During an appearance on the Voices of Wrestling radio show in September 2003, Laura talked more about her WWE exit, expressing her belief that the company had done her wrong, while also reiterating that if she was ever to return, she wouldn't want to wrestle the other women. She also claimed to be unaware that Triple H and Stephanie were engaged, but basically said, good for them. On October 25, 2003, Paul Levesque and Stephanie McMahon tied the knot in front of more than 300 guests in Sleepy Hollow, New York. Unsurprisingly, of course, Joanie Laurer was not among those invited to the ceremony. In fact, she was essentially persona non grata as far as WWE were concerned overall. As time went on and her very sad downward spiral continued, that stance would only further solidify. In July of 2004, a clearly under the influence Joanie Laurer once again stopped by the Howard Stern show, where she brought up Triple H, who she kept referring to as Triple Ass. She talked about him marrying Stephanie McMahon. She said people in WWE were immoral and unethical, and claimed that she hadn't received a royalty check from them in some time. She also said that Triple H was, quote, all gassed up and probably needed to go to rehab or something during that interview, which, in fairness, is kind of an uncomfortable watch. It's a bit of a train wreck. This sort of appearance was, unfortunately, kind of par for the course when it came to Joanie Laurer in this era. She became better known for her intoxicated behavior and the high drama of her relationship with Sean Waltman, which, as you may have guessed, did not have a happy ending, as the couple broke up for good in 2005. Incidentally, one of the last times Laurer saw Levesque was when he showed up at her house to take Waltman to rehab in 2004. But all was just fine in the McMahon-Helmsley household mind, with the couple welcoming the first of 3 daughters on the 4th of July 2006. Triple H, for all intents and purposes untouchable due to his family ties, continued to gain influence backstage, and as the years wore on, the belief that Levesque and Steph would one day run the company only grew stronger. Joanie Laurer didn't make too many wrestling-related appearances during the years that she publicly battled with substance abuse and mental health-related issues. Maybe doing a convention here or a shoot interview there, but really, it seemed like she had by and large moved on from the business, just as the business had moved on from her. What was abundantly clear, though, is that whenever she did speak publicly, she had been very hurt badly and maybe continued to be hurt by the double whammy of her breakup from Paul Levesque and her WWE exit. On November 7th, 2011, Laurer once again visited with Howard Stern for a wide-ranging interview where she blamed Triple H's affair with Stephanie for ending her WWE career and revealed that she had recently written Vince McMahon a letter asking him to put their old issues behind them in order to do business together. McMahon had apparently responded that there was no animosity from his perspective, but the creative had nothing for her. With WWE being PG rated and Joanie venturing further into the world of adult entertainment, the chances of her being welcomed back into the fold were closer to none than they were to slim. Triple H himself seemed to confirm this when her name came up during his appearance on the Broken Skull Sessions podcast in February of 2015. Austin asked him about the odds of Chyna being inducted into the Hall of Fame one day, with Levesque saying that she absolutely deserved the honor, while hinting that her late career choices might prevent it from happening. Now, many noted the absolute hypocrisy of this stance, given the crimes and misdemeanors of some of those already inducted into the Hall of Fame. Laurer, who was at that point living in Japan and teaching English, responded to Levesque's statement days later while being interviewed by her friend and somebody who consistently championed her talents and achievements, Vince Russo. During this interview, Laurer claimed that WWE denied her treatment via their talent wellness policy and also claimed that Levesque had hit her once during their relationship. In response, Levesque released this statement to Bleacher Report. The false statements and reckless allegations made by Joan Laurer, aka Chyna, on a recent podcast about a physical dispute are a complete fabrication. While Joan has had significant struggles in life, this does not justify making such claims. In June, Laurer, who was being managed by a team who were trying to produce a documentary on her life and attempt to mend fences with her former employer, visited WWE's corporate headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. But it was an unauthorized visit that did absolutely nothing to improve relations between the two parties. Just weeks later, on August 12, 2015, Joanie Laurer and Paul Levesque met face-to-face for the first time in over a decade. Both were attending the funeral of Roddy Piper when, after the service, she approached him and they embraced, with Laurer later clarifying that she had whispered she was sorry for the things she'd said about him over the years while under emotional distress. Sean Waltman, who did not see the interaction firsthand, to be fair, claimed shortly afterwards that she had actually bum-rushed Triple H and was close to being taken down by his security team, but other accounts and a video published online of their encounter by one of Chyna's friends seemed to prove otherwise. At the end of the day, it was nice that Laurer, who continued to struggle with addiction and poor mental health, got to enjoy that moment of closure, regardless of the circumstances. It also became that much more poignant when the news broke on April 20th, 2016, that Joanie Laurer had been found dead in her home in Redondo Beach, California, having overdosed on alcohol and various prescription drugs 3 days prior. She was only 46 years old. There was an immediate outpouring of grief from those who knew her, including Paul Levesque, who discussed her passing with The Mirror, saying the following: "It is obviously tragic, and clearly my well wishes go out to her friends and family. Brilliance sometimes, and that ability to push barriers and boundaries and be a pioneer is often connected closely with other things that aren't so positive sometimes, and demons, and unfortunately, that is the case. She was just a great person, an amazing talent, and a groundbreaking pioneer that was never afraid to go out on a limb and blaze her own trail through life. When you're choosing a path, you can say, hey, here's a path, let's go down that one, or you can blaze your own path and burn it up and create something for others to follow. And that's what she did, and that star shone bright, but unfortunately burned out way too fast." Regarding the prospect of Chyna being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, he added the following: "It's not my decision, but I definitely think, as I've said before, that what she did in her life certainly warrants it. There was never anybody like her before her, and there will never be anybody like her after. It's certainly warranted, and I'm sure at some point when the time is right, hopefully, that can happen." Stephanie McMahon echoed those sentiments, telling TMZ that Chyna would be inducted into the Hall of Fame one day, but she didn't know when. On February 18th, 2019, it was announced that Chyna, as a member of D-Generation X, was going to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And though many saw this as a fair compromise of sorts, there have been repeated calls for her to be inducted as a solo star, something that Paul Levesque has said will definitely happen down the line. And, as WWE's Chief Content Officer, it is now his decision who goes in and when. The details of Chyna's murky WWE exit may have regrettably cast a shadow over the rest of her life and career, but she really did blaze a trail, and her influence on future generations of superstars, including today's own, is very clear for all to see. Chyna deserves to be remembered for a lot more than a very bad breakup and the all-too-public decline that followed. It would be somewhat poetic if Paul Levesque could maybe play his part in making sure of that. I've been Jack from Cultaholic Wrestling, and that was the true story of the Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Chyna love triangle. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.